I've never been one to believe in ghosts. Old houses creak, wind howls through cracked windows, and the mind plays tricks when you're alone. Or at least that's what I used to think until I moved into 313 Windsor Street. It was an old Victorian, the kind of house with steep gables and ivy-strewn brickwork. It felt grand yet forgotten, perfect for a fresh start after my divorce. The rent was suspiciously low, but the landlord shrugged it off. Place is old. Hard to keep tenants. I should have asked more questions. I was unpacking late into the evening. The air inside felt stale despite the open windows. Around midnight, I heard it. Soft footsteps upstairs. My heart pounded. Old pipes, creaking floorboards, maybe even a raccoon in the attic. Still, something about the sound was deliberate, like someone pacing heel to toe just above me. I told myself it was nothing and went to bed. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, but one door wouldn't budge. Its key was missing, and the landlord promised to send a locksmith. Until then, I ignored it. 3 nights in, I woke to faint whispers. At first, I thought it was the TV in the living room, but it was off. The sound seemed to seep through the walls, soft yet persistent, like someone murmuring secrets just out of reach. I followed the noise to the locked room. Pressing my ear against the cold wood, I strained to make out words. It wasn't English, just a hushed, rhythmic chant. Goosebumps prickled my arms. Then the whispering stopped. The house held its breath with me. I stumbled back, heart racing, and fled downstairs, sleeping on the couch with every light on. By the end of the first week, the smell started damp, musty, like old fabric left to rot. It drifted from the second floor, faint but constant. No amount of air freshener could mask it. One night, I woke choking on that foul stench. My room was freezing, colder than the December wind outside. When I sat up, I realized something was wrong. The door to my bedroom was open. Worse still, faint indentations pressed into the mattress beside me, like someone had been lying there, watching me sleep. Desperate, I called the landlord again, demanding the locksmith. He arrived the next afternoon, a wiry, quiet man with eyes that darted nervously around the house. As he examined the lock, he asked, "You been hearing things?" I didn't answer. Took him less than 10 minutes to force the door open. Dust billowed out, and that rotten, wet smell hit me like a punch. Inside, the room was empty. At first glance, old, faded wallpaper peeled in long strips. A broken rocking chair faced the window, its surface worn smooth. And in the far corner, something lay draped beneath a heavy, moth-eaten blanket. The locksmith muttered, "God help you," and practically ran from the house. I didn't want to see what was under the blanket, but I couldn't ignore it. Trembling, I reached out and pulled the fabric back. It was a child's wooden cradle, empty, but for a small, stained doll with hollow eyes that seemed to watch me with something close to recognition. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I spun around, yanking the knob, but it wouldn't budge. Then came the whispers again, closer, louder, rising into a frantic, urgent chant. The walls seemed to pulse with each word. In the dimness, I swear I saw something move in the corner, a shadow too thick, too solid. And then, the cradle began to rock on its own, slow and steady. I froze, my breath hitching, heart hammering so hard it felt like it might shatter my ribs. The cradle creaked softly, its gentle rhythm at odds with the suffocating dread pressing down on me. The air in the room felt wrong, thick, oppressive, like breathing through soaked cloth. My eyes stayed fixed on the cradle, but I couldn't ignore the heavy presence behind me, the place where that too solid shadow had shifted. I told myself to run. I even pictured throwing open the door and sprinting down the stairs, out into the street. but my feet wouldn't move. Something deeper than fear pinned me there. It was as if the house itself wanted me still. Then, from behind the cradle, something clicked. A brittle, scraping sound, like long, ragged fingernails brushing across the wooden floor. Slowly, deliberately, I forced myself to speak, my voice cracking like dry leaves. "Who's there?" No answer, just that relentless, scratching drag, and the cradle rocking steady and slow. My gaze darted to the room's only window, a tall, narrow frame with warped glass. It was fogged from the inside, smeared with something dark and greasy, like old handprints. Outside, the streetlight flickered as if struggling against the night itself. And then, the whispering began again. Not from behind me this time, but from inside the cradle. It was a child's voice, soft, sing-song, like a broken lullaby, the words slurring into something twisted and ancient. My stomach clenched as a low, cold hum reverberated through the floorboards, rising like static in the walls. I stumbled back, knocking into the broken rocking chair, tipped, scraping loudly across the floor before crashing down. The sudden noise shattered the awful rhythm of the whispers, but only for a moment. Then came the laugh, high-pitched and breathy, like a toddler's giggle, but warped, stretched too thin, echoing from every corner of the room at once. My chest tightened, and I backed toward the door, fumbling for the knob. It still wouldn't turn, locked, sealed, as though the house had swallowed it whole. Suddenly, the cradle stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound. Heavy and expectant. I barely dared to breathe as I watched the cradle, my legs trembling. The blanket I'd thrown aside was now crumpled on the floor, but something beneath the cradle moved. Slowly, impossibly, it crawled out. A small, twisted figure, pale as ash, its limbs jointed wrong, its face hidden beneath a curtain of matted black hair. It pulled itself forward on spindly, trembling hands, each finger tipped with jagged, yellowed nails. His breath hitched in wet, uneven gasps. Couldn't scream. My voice was trapped somewhere deep inside me, buried under a crushing wave of primal terror. The thing lifted its head, tilting it at an unnatural angle, the hair parting just enough for me to see its face, or what was left of it. Its eyes, hollow, dark pits, endlessly deep, the same eyes as the doll I'd found in the cradle. And then it smiled, a grotesque, broken smile that split its face far too wide. It whispered, in a voice like shattered glass, "Stay." I yanked the doorknob with everything I had. It twisted, finally, mercifully, and I stumbled backward into the hallway, crashing hard onto the landing. Pain shot through my elbow, but I barely noticed. Pain shot through my elbow, but I barely noticed. I scrambled to my feet and ran. Behind me, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping in the icy night air, tears streaming down my face. I collapsed on the front lawn, trembling, my pulse still pounding in my ears. When I finally forced myself to look back, the house was dark, silent, its gabled windows blank and lifeless. But just before I turned away, I saw something, movement in the window of the locked room. A small, pale hand pressed gently against the glass and waved. I should have known something was wrong the moment I signed the lease. The rental house was old but well kept. A small, two-story cottage tucked at the edge of a quiet, wooded neighborhood. The landlord, a wiry man with deep-set eyes, had hesitated when I asked about the storage room beneath the stairs. It was the only locked door in the house. "It's just old," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. I shrugged it off. Everyone has quirks, and I wasn't planning on needing the extra space. I should have listened. The first few nights passed without incident, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't the typical paranoia of living alone. It felt personal, like someone was waiting for me to notice them. Then came the scratching. I first heard it while unpacking the kitchen late one night. Faint, deliberate, coming from the floor near the base of the stairs. It was soft but persistent. A slow, scraping sound like something sharp being dragged across wood. Probably mice, I told myself, forcing a laugh. But the sound, it was too steady. I stomped hard on the floor, and the scratching stopped immediately, leaving the house oppressively silent. I didn't sleep well that night. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I stood before the narrow wooden door beneath the stairs, running my fingers over its chipped, peeling paint. It felt colder than the rest of the house, the air around it oddly still. I tried the knob, locked as expected, but as I turned to walk away, I heard it 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the other side of the door. I stumbled back, heart pounding, staring at the unmoving door. My rational mind kicked in, pipes shifting, wood settling, something explainable. Anything but what it sounded like. That night, I shoved a chair against the door before going to bed. By the second week, the house felt different, wrong. The air was thick with a musty, earthy smell, like damp soil. The lights flickered at random, and cold spots bloomed in impossible places. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m., shivering despite the thick blankets. My breath fogged in the freezing air. Groggy, disoriented, I sat up, and that's when I heard it, a whisper. It was coming from downstairs, low and urgent, rising and falling like a pleading voice. My stomach twisted. I strained to hear the words, but they were just out of reach, muffled by the walls. Then, slowly, the whispering shifted, moving up the stairs. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling, dialing the landlord's number. No answer. The whisper grew louder, closer, until it was just outside my bedroom door. It stopped. Silence rang in my ears. I didn't sleep again that night. Desperate, I called a locksmith the next morning. The door beneath the stairs had to be opened. Couldn't live like this. The locksmith arrived, a grizzled old man with wary eyes. He barely acknowledged me as he set to work on the rusted lock. Took longer than I expected, almost as if something inside the door didn't want it opened. Finally, with a sharp click, the lock gave way. The door creaked open, revealing darkness. The musty stench hit me like a wave, thick and choking. I gagged, covering my mouth as I peered inside. The space was small and cramped, lined with ancient, crumbling brick. Should have been empty, but in the center of the floor, there was a hole, about 3 feet wide, dark and gaping, its edges jagged and uneven, like the earth itself had been torn apart. The air around it pulsed with an unnatural chill, carrying a faint, decaying odor. What is that?" I whispered. The locksmith just shook his head, stepping back, muttering something about things best left buried. He refused to go near the hole again, leaving without even collecting his fee. I stared at the hole for what felt like hours, unable to move. Just as I turned to leave, something deep within the darkness shifted. A faint, scraping sound, claws on stone, and then breathing. I slammed the door shut, shoving the chair back under the knob. My hands shook as I backed away, adrenaline flooding my veins. My mind raced with every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. The whispers returned that night, louder, more insistent, filled with something close to hunger. They echoed through the walls, accompanied by soft, dragging footsteps pacing just beyond the locked door. Around 2 a.m., I heard the knocks again, slow, deliberate, from inside the storage room. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't sleep after hearing those knocks. I sat upright in bed, clutching my phone, fingers hovering over the emergency call button. The air felt thick, suffocating, like the house itself was holding its breath. I told myself it was the wind, the pipes, anything but what I knew it really was. At some point, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted into a restless, dreamless sleep. When I woke, pale dawn light filtered through the window. The house was silent. Still shaken, I decided I couldn't stay there another night. I pack a bag, find a motel, and deal with the rest later. But as I descended the stairs, every creak of the old would send spikes of anxiety through my chest. The storage room door was open. It was wide open, the chair I'd shoved against it lying on its side several feet away, as if it had been thrown. The dark space beneath the stairs yawned like an open mouth, its depths stretching far beyond what seemed possible. And the hole, it was bigger. The jagged edges of torn earth seemed to have expanded, its dark, endless interior pulsing with a faint, sickly hum. The musty, decaying stench was worse now, thick and putrid. My stomach clenched. Something compelled me. Something ancient and cold that twisted inside my chest like a hook. I needed to see. As I leaned over the edge, peering into the void, the house seemed to groan around me, its old walls tightening like lungs holding a breath. Then I heard it, breathing, slow, ragged, and wet, echoing from deep inside the hole. It sounded wrong, inhuman, like someone struggling to breathe with shattered ribs. And then something moved, a soft scrape like claws on stone. My breath hitched as pale, elongated fingers emerged from the darkness, their cracked, bloodless nails digging into the dirt at the edge of the hole. The hand twitched, once, twice, before it began pulling itself up. I stumbled back with a strangled cry, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. The thing climbed slowly, deliberately, as if savoring every moment of its ascent. Its thin, pallid limbs bent in unnatural angles, sinewy muscles coiling under ashen skin stretched too tight over bones. I tried to run, but the house wouldn't let me. I tried to run, but the house wouldn't let me. The door to the front entrance slammed shut with a violent bang, locking itself with a force that made the walls tremble. Windows rattled in their frames as if laughing at my desperation. From the hole, it rose fully into the dim light. Its face, God, its face, hollow and eyeless, its sockets yawning abysses that seemed to see me all the same. Its mouth was a ragged, blackened gash stretching far too wide, filled with cracked, rotting teeth. It breathed in wet, heaving gasps, drawing in the air like it could taste me. And then, it spoke, in a voice that sounded like broken glass dragged across stone. It hissed a single, terrible word. Stay. I lunged for the stairs, adrenaline surging. But before I could reach the top, the walls of the house shuddered. Long, spindly fingers shot out from the cracks in the wooden planks, gnarled and twisted, wrapping around my ankles with impossible strength. I fell hard, my chin slamming against the edge of the step. Stars exploded behind my eyes, but I kicked and clawed like a wild animal, desperate to break free. The thing dragged me back. Its grip was iron, cold as death, and its jagged nails tore into my skin as it pulled me toward the gaping, pulsing darkness of the hole. The scent of decay overwhelmed me, making me gag. I twisted, grabbing the banister with both hands, screaming until my throat burned. But the thing was stronger. It dragged me inch by inch toward the hungry void. Just before the darkness swallowed me, I made the mistake of looking back. It smiled, a grotesque, twisted grin splitting its face from ear to ear, stretching its inhuman features into something resembling joy. And then, the world went black. I woke up outside, sprawled in the dirt at the edge of the overgrown backyard. The house stood dark and silent behind me, its gabled windows empty and hollow, like dead eyes watching with quiet amusement. I staggered to my feet, lungs burning, legs shaking. My arms were scratched and bruised, my skin icy cold. But somehow, I was alive. I didn't look back as I ran. I don't know how long I was unconscious or how I escaped, but when I returned the next day with the police, the house was gone. Not just empty, gone. Nothing remained but a patch of barren dirt where the foundation had been, as if the house had never existed at all. But sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the world is quiet and still, I still hear its soft, deliberate knocks echoing through the dark. From beneath the floor,